Here I'll give you examples on how to use the index and match function in order to create powerful lookup formulas in Excel that are more robust and versatile than the Vlookup function. First, I'll show you how to use the index and match functions, and then I'll give you some examples that go from simple to more complex. Before we start, check the video description and click the link to TeachExcel so you can download the files for the tutorial and follow along. Now the reason you want to use index and match instead of Vlookup is because index and match combined create lookups that can go left, right, up, and down as easy as anything, whereas Vlookup and Hlookup are a lot more restrictive. Now the first thing you want to do is to make sure that you have your data set up correctly. Over here I've got a table of data, and the most important thing is that each column has the same number of rows. That might not seem like a big deal right now, but you'll understand as we get into the examples why that's important. Now, index and match are two separate functions that are combined in order to create a lookup formula. So I'm first going to explain them separately, and then we'll combine them for the examples. Index is what actually allows you to retrieve data from a table. So let's look at it. Equals index, open parentheses. Now there's two different setups for this function. It may seem confusing, but we go with the top one here, the array argument, row number argument, and column number argument. The first argument is the array argument. This is the table of data from which we will return something. So let's say that I want to return the sales numbers. I simply select the sales number column for the array argument. Then comma, and the next argument is the row number. That means which row in the array should I go to return a value? Should I go to row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, etc., etc.? Let's say that I want to return a value from row 2. I put a 2 for the row number argument. And since this is a single column array, there's no need for the column number argument. It's just one column anyway. So I can close the parentheses, hit enter, and we should get 11,012. Now if I wanted to get the first value, I replace the row number with a 1, and we get 13,095, and so on. Now if you make the array argument larger than one column, let's say we do sales and manufacturer, then you have to enter not only the row number argument, but also the column number argument. So let's say we want to go down 2 and to the right 1. We enter a 2 for the row number and then comma 2 for the column number, because we're going down to the second row and we're going over to the second column, and that should return XYZ. Now this seems like it does everything that we need. So why do we need match? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to replace these hard-coded values for row number and column number with the match function. Now the match function is what tells us which row and which column to use. So the match function is actually what works kind of like a VLOOKUP in concept. So we do equals, match, open parentheses, and the very first thing is the lookup value, so the value that we want to find. Let's say that we were looking up for a specific part number over here, say ASC4. We would type that in here just like for the VLOOKUP. Quotation mark, ASC4, close quote, comma, and the lookup array. Where are we going to look for this value? Well, we're going to look for it in the part column. And what the match function is going to do is to return the relative position of the value ASC-4. The relative position meaning, in this column, right here, ASC-7 would be 1, because it's in the very first row of this selection. This would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So the relative position within the lookup array. Now the final argument is match type. We can do less than, exact match, or greater than. Usually you're going to want to go with exact match, but later in the tutorial I'll show you how you can use less than for some of the index match formulas. So 0 for exact match. That means it will exactly match the lookup value. close parentheses, and we have 3 because in our lookup array, ASC-4 is the 3rd row down. Match can also work horizontally, so it doesn't just have to work going up and down like this. We could do a match that will go left to right equals match, lookup value. Let's say we want to do it for these alt parts over here. Let's say I want to do alt part 2, lookup array, these values here, match type, 0 for exact match, and it should return a 2. So remember, the match function returns the relative position. So the lookup array is going to have only one row or one column, and the match function will tell you how far from the left or how far from the top the value that it finds is. So alt part 2 is 2 from the left. This is the very first cell on the left, second cell, third cell. Alt part 2 is in the second cell, so it returns a 2. And that's how you can use the match function for the row number and the column number argument for the index function. You can use just the row number, just the column number, or both of them together to make really powerful lookup formulas. Now that can seem rather confusing at this point, so let's go ahead and dig into some of the examples, and it should be a little easier to understand after that. For the first example, let's start off with a very basic vertical lookup here, equals index, open parentheses. Now for the array, what value do we want to return? Let's get the sales number for a particular part. So we select sales, comma. Now which row do we want to get? Well, it's for a particular part, so we need to find out which row that part is. So we use the match function, open parentheses. Let's go ahead and get, let's say, ASC-4. So for our lookup value, we do quotation mark, ASC-4, close quote. Remember, for lookup values, just like for the Vlookup, you need quotation marks around text. You don't need it around individual numbers. So ASC-4 with quotation marks, comma, the lookup array, that's going to be the part number column. And here we have a very interesting thing you have to take note of. These two tables, these two arrays right here, have to be exactly the same height. If you don't have it the same height, you're going to get the wrong result. Because remember, the match function will tell you how many rows from the top it found the value. And then it's going to return that. In this case, it'll find out ASC-4 is in row 3. Then it's going to return that to the index function and say return the value from row 3. So over here, it's going to go 1, 2, 3 to return 9, 5, 5, 8. If you had this over here, just 1 up, it wouldn't work, or 1 down. So make sure it's the exact same size. For match type, we're going to do 0 for exact match, close parentheses. We don't need a column number for this one, close parentheses. And we get 9, 5, 5, 8. So you can see here, if I just replaced this with a 3, we'd get the same result. So we're just using the match function to tell us how many rows to go down, and that's it. Now let's do a horizontal lookup, equals index, open parentheses. Now what values do we want to return? Let's go ahead and get the alt part, the alternative part, here for one of these parts over here. So I'm going to keep it very simple, and let's say we're going to figure out which alternative part we want for ASC-7. So I'm going to select this table right here, just these 3 cells. And now the next thing we need is a match function to tell us from which column to return a value, column 1, 2, or 3. So going back to the index function over here, we type a comma, and the next argument is actually for the row number instead of the column number. Now we can do one of a few things here. If it's easier for you to remember this, you can just input a 1, or you can just leave it blank by typing another comma, and then entering the column number argument. Or instead of doing any of that, we can put the match function here that we'd put for the column number argument. Now that may sound a little bit confusing, but the point is put a 1 here, put nothing here, and just type in a comma, or just go with the match function that we're going to put in anyway. So match, open parentheses. What's the lookup value? Let's get it from alt part 2. Comma, lookup array, right here. Match type, 0 for exact. Close parentheses. And remember, even though it says we're at the row number argument, don't worry about that. We don't need to put anything in for the column number. Just leave it like it is. Close parentheses, and we should get CRC-9. Now, just to show you what I meant over here, since we put this in for the row number argument, and just mentally that can seem confusing, or it may be confusing for other people who look at your work later on and think, this only goes left to right, it's horizontal, why did they put that in there for the row number? If you want to make it easier on yourself, put a 1 in there, comma, and then put this in for the column number argument. It's going to return the same value. Or you can take out the 1 and leave it blank. Same thing. So in this example, what we want to do is get something from H2 to J2 right over here. And we need to figure out which column to use. So we use the match function here. And we search for alt part 2 up here. And just like in the vertical lookup, we had to make sure that the size up and down was the same number of rows in each selection. Here we need to make sure the same number of columns are present in each selection. Otherwise, it's going to return an incorrect result. So in the match function, we've got 3 columns, and in the index function, we've got 3 columns. Now that you've got those 2 examples down, let's combine both of them to make a 2-way lookup. And you'll see this is a lot more intuitive than a 2-way lookup with Vlookup or Hlookup. So we go equals index. Now this is the one part that does change a bit. This time, instead of selecting 1 column or 1 row of data, we want to select multiple rows and multiple columns because we're going to have a multi-dimensional lookup. So we can get data from a row and a column. Let's say we want to get data from the alt part section over here. So I'm going to select all of the alt part values. Now I just need to know from which row to get the data as well as which column. So comma, for the row number we use our match function, open parentheses. I want to use the part here to figure things out. And I'm just going to hard code all the values in here to keep it simple. So let's say lookup value of ASC-4, close quote, comma, lookup array, part right here, comma, match type, exact, close parentheses. Now we're back in the index function, so comma, let's go to the column number argument. We need another match function, open parentheses, lookup value. Let's go for alt part 2. And notice that this is not case sensitive, so I don't have to capitalize the A and the P here. Close quote, comma, lookup array. This time it's horizontal, alt part 1, 2, and 3. Comma, match type, 0 for exact. Close parentheses to get out of the match. Close parentheses for the index function. And before we hit enter, notice that this here has just as many rows as our array table from which we will return values. And this here has just as many columns. Very important to keep that straight. Now let's hit enter, and we get CRC6. So ASC4, alternate part number 2, CRC6. Now this may seem a little confusing, but it shouldn't be too difficult by this point. The only thing different that we really did is to make our array for the index function larger, so multiple rows and multiple columns. And we needed to do that to be able to return a value that goes left to right as well as up and down. So we have a multi-row, multi-column table array here. We need to figure out where to get the values. So for the row number, we use a match function. Then for the column number, we use another match function that tells us from which column we are going to get the value. So 2 match functions, 1 index function combined to create pretty much the most versatile lookup formula in Excel. It can go left, right, up, down, all around. Now let's look at some other examples with index and match. Up to this point, I've used an exact match for the match function. Now let's use one that's not exact. Let's say I want to find the 10th most ranked sales right here, or the 10th most ranked part by sales. I only have 7 here. I can see that visually, and this is just an example to show you how this works. So, equals index array. We want to get the top sales, or the 10th highest sales by ranking. So we choose the sales column. Next, we need the row number. So let's go with match. And I'm going to use the rank column to figure this out. And I want to get the 10th highest rank. Lookup array right here, comma. Now for the match type, I don't know if there is 10. So if there isn't 10, I want to get the next lowest value. So notice here that for 1, the match type for the match function, we have less than, finds the largest value that is less than or equal to the lookup value. And the lookup array must be placed in ascending order. Greater than is basically just the opposite of that. Finds the smallest value that is greater than or equal to the lookup value. And in this case, the lookup array must be placed in descending order. So we want less than or 1. Now close the parentheses for match, close parentheses for index. And remember, there is no 10 in the ranking column. So instead it returns 3196, or the next highest value. So let's say that you have this function, this formula right here set up, and you did it 2 months ago. And someone comes in and they mess up your data. They sort it. So right now it's sorted lowest to highest, ascending order. Everything works perfect. And they just want to reverse that. So they do a sort largest to smallest. Well, watch the 3196. It's now 13,095. Okay. Well, that doesn't seem accurate. Doesn't seem correct, does it? No, because that's the number 1 most ranked. So it's very easy to accidentally mess up the results from the index and match functions if you are relying on the greater than or less than match type for the match function. And you have to be really careful of that when you have large data sets and other people might be manipulating that data set. Or if you yourself just forget about it 3 months, a year and a half after you made it, sort the data, and then don't realize why your values for index and match are off. As well, you may have noticed that this one in cell A7 also changed because it relies on values from the second row, and we just sorted the data table. So the data in row 2 changed. It's now CRC7, whereas before it was CRC9. So just be very, very careful when you're messing around with the data tables that you have these lookup functions referring to. It's time to make a more powerful index match lookup function. Let's go ahead and make one that is a bit more dynamic and is going to automatically return for us the value or the part number that has the highest amount of sales. So here I'm going to show you how to put other functions within the index and match functions. You can use a lot of different functions inside this formula, but this is a great one to illustrate how you can easily make more powerful lookup formulas. We start with equals index array. Let's return the part number with the highest number of sales. So we select the part number column, then comma, which row number, match function of course, open parentheses. Now here's where it changes a little bit. What's the lookup value? Well, we don't know. We have to figure out what the lookup value is going to be for the max number of sales. It's easy here because the table is sorted. In a big table, it probably won't be. So how do we solve this? We use the max function. So simply type max, open parentheses, select the sales column, and this should also be the same size as the other columns that you're going to enter into this formula, just to make sure that no errors are created. Once you've selected that, let's close the parentheses, and now we've got the nice max function right here. And what that's going to do is it's going to return the actual maximum value from this range right here. So it's going to return 13,095 back to the max function. So that will be the lookup value. Now, comma to go to the lookup array. Well, where do we want to look for that value? We want to look for it here in the sales column. So we do select the column twice. Now, comma, to go to the match type, we want an exact match, of course. Now we close the parentheses for the match function, and then we close the parentheses for the index function. Hit enter, and we get ASC-7 right here. So all we did here is we replaced the lookup value with this function. And this function simply got the maximum value that's contained within this table for the sales column. And as I mentioned, you could put a multitude of different functions in here. All that you need them to return is a lookup value that can be found within this lookup array. Now, once you understand how to build this type of lookup formula using the index and match functions and following the examples in this tutorial, you've probably got 95 or 98% of all the scenarios where you're going to be using this in your day-to-day work. In the next and last example, I'm going to show you an easy way to build really powerful index match lookup formulas that can do a lot with your data. So up here we have a two-way lookup. It returns CRC-6. Now let's say that we wanted to take this two-way lookup and we only wanted to return the number that comes after the dash. In this case, that would be a 6. So how would you do that with the index and match lookup formula? Well, you'd actually have to combine it with some text manipulation formulas, and in the very end, it's going to look kind of scary. I'll show you the final formula now, just so you can see how scary it looks, and then I'll show you how to easily build it without freaking out too much. So this is the entire formula. And all of this just to return the number after the dash. Now the easy way to build this is very simple. First, you need to get the index and match lookup formula correct. So get that correct in a separate cell over here. Now once you have that, then go to another cell and get the text manipulation functions that are required to get the 6, get those set up correctly, and use this cell as the reference for now. Equals, right? I'm going to do some text manipulation here, and I want to get text from the right of this cell. So I select this cell for the text argument, comma. Now, how many characters do I want to get from this cell? Well, I want to get every character that comes after the dash. So I need to figure out how many characters that is. And the standard way of doing this in Excel is to first count how many characters are in the cell. That would be 5. And then figure out at which point in the cell comes the dash. The dash comes at character position number 4. So it ends up being, in this case, 5 minus 4 equals 1. Now that may sound a little bit confusing, and some of the text manipulation tutorials will cover that in more depth, but let's start with len to get the length or the number of characters in the cell. And then we will subtract that by the character position of the dash, which we will locate using the find function. We're going to find the dash within this cell here. Start number, we don't need to worry about that. So close parentheses, and we should get 6. Now at this point, we've got two working formulas, this one here and this one here. In your worksheet, you might want to have that in one cell. So to do that and to create our monster formula now, what we're going to do is take this working index match formula here and copy everything except for the equal sign. Then we'll go down here and replace every cell reference to this cell here with the index match formula. Now it's easier if we start at the end of the cell. So I select A8, paste that in there, A8, paste, A8, paste. And there we've got our monster formula, and it wasn't too difficult to enter. As you can see, the index and match functions really allow you to do wonderful things in Excel. And once you get comfortable using them, to be honest, you're never going to go back to Vlookup or Hlookup again, ever. So make sure to download this workbook, follow these examples, and practice, practice, practice. I hope you liked the tutorial. If it was helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And make sure to subscribe and accept notifications so you can see all the new tutorials.